Beneath our feet lie hidden worlds, caves that stretch into the unknown, whispering secrets lost to time. Some say they lead to lost civilizations. Others believe they hold something far more mysterious. Tonight, we journey through these depths, uncovering eerie tunnels, forgotten chambers, and places where reality bends. So sit back, relax, and let the mysteries unfold. And if you drift off to sleep, the stories will be here when you wake. Chapter 1. The Subterranean Labyrinth that shouldn't exist beneath the surface of the earth, where light fades into endless darkness. There are places few have ever seen. Deep within forgotten caverns, hidden beneath layers of rock that have stood undisturbed for millennia, a world unlike any other waits in silence. The deeper you descend, the more reality itself seems to change. The air grows thick with the scent of ancient stone. The distant echoes of dripping water stretch into eternity, and the weight of the unknown presses against your very being. The walls of the cave seem to breathe, shifting in the flickering light of a torch, revealing patterns carved by time or perhaps by something else entirely. The deeper one ventures, the more it becomes apparent that this place was not meant to be disturbed. There are those who believe that some cave systems are more than just hollow spaces carved by time and water. Legends whisper of subterranean labyrinths, so vast, so intricate, that they cannot possibly be the work of nature alone. One such place exists in the heart of a remote mountain range, a cavern system so deep and complex that no one has ever fully mapped its entirety. The locals refuse to speak its name, warning outsiders that once you enter, you may never return. They say the air itself hums with a strange energy, as if the very ground is alive, pulsing with the echoes of a time long forgotten. Some claim that in the stillness, you can hear voices, distant and unrecognizable, calling from deep within the stone corridors. The entrance is barely more than a crack in the earth, hidden beneath tangled roots and overgrown brush, as if nature itself is trying to keep something inside. The first explorers who dared to enter spoke of tunnels that stretched impossibly far, of chambers so vast they could not see the ceiling, and of walls covered in symbols older than recorded history. Some swore they heard whispers in the darkness, voices speaking in a language no human tongue had ever known. Others claimed to have seen shadows moving just beyond the reach of their lanterns, shapes that should not have been there. The air was thick with moisture, yet carried a dryness that made the back of their throats ache. The very act of breathing felt heavier, as if the cave itself resisted their presence. One team of researchers, armed with state-of-the-art equipment and guided by satellite imaging, attempted to map the depths of the cavern. They believed science could explain the anomalies, that technology could shed light on what lay beneath. But the further they ventured, the more their instruments failed them. Compasses spun wildly, radios crackled with static, and their lights flickered as if something unseen was draining the very energy from their devices. And then, without warning, one of them vanished. There was no sound, no sign of struggle, just a single moment of darkness, and then nothing. His voice was gone from the radio, his footprints stopped abruptly in the soft dirt, and even the thermal imaging showed only an empty tunnel where he had stood just moments before. Panic set in, but retreat was not an option. The only way out was the way they had come, and even that seemed uncertain now. The passages twisted in ways they hadn't before, leading them down unfamiliar paths, forcing them deeper and deeper into the unknown. Hours passed, then days. The outside world sent search teams, but no trace of the researchers was ever found. Their base camp remained untouched, their supplies undisturbed, as if they had simply stepped beyond the reach of reality itself. The only clue left behind was a single chilling transmission recorded from their last known location. A whispering voice, barely audible beneath the static, repeating the same phrase over and over. They are awake. The tunnels stretch beyond human comprehension, their paths defying conventional mapping. Some corridors end in sheer drops, bottomless pits that swallow light and sound alike. Others lead to chambers filled with massive stone formations, some resembling crude staircases leading into nothingness, others appearing like altars forgotten by time. In one such chamber, strange artifacts have been recovered, impossibly smooth stone spheres that hum softly when touched, carvings depicting figures with elongated limbs and hollow eyes, and what appears to be a massive door, sealed shut with no visible means of opening it. Among those who have ventured close, there are stories of strange occurrences, equipment inexplicably malfunctioning, the sensation of being watched, the chilling realization that their own reflections in the cavern's shallow pools do not always match their movements. Some researchers report waking up in the darkness, certain they had heard their own names whispered in the void, only to find their colleagues sound asleep, unaware of anything unusual. The cavern remains sealed, its entrance covered by a rock slide that some say was not natural. Those who live nearby refuse to go near it, and those who hear the story are left with an unsettling question. If the labyrinth was built by someone or something, what were they trying to keep hidden? And more importantly, did they succeed? And if they failed, what might still be waiting in the depths, unseen, untouched, waiting for the moment when the stones shift again and the entrance reopens? Chapter 2. The Abyss Beneath the Mountain. There are places in this world where even the bravest fear to tread, deep, winding passages beneath mountains, hidden from time, untouched by the hands of men. Legends whisper of such places, describing endless tunnels that spiral into the depths of the earth, where the air grows thick, the light fades to nothing, and the silence is absolute. Some call them gateways to forgotten worlds, remnants of lost civilizations, or perhaps something even older, places where the laws of reality seem to shift and bend, where the line between what is real and what is not begins to blur. In one such place, beneath the towering peaks of an unnamed mountain range, a labyrinth of tunnels stretches into the unknown, its true depths never fully explored. Few have ever dared to enter, and even fewer have returned to tell of what they found. The entrance itself is unassuming, a simple crevice in the rock, hidden among the dense forest that blankets the mountainside. It yawns open like the mouth of a sleeping giant, exhaling a gust of stale, cold air that carries the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, almost like rusted iron. It is said that animals refuse to go near it, that birds do not sing in the trees that surround it, as if nature itself acknowledges the presence of something unnatural lurking below. Those who have ventured inside tell of tunnels that stretch beyond comprehension, corridors that seem to shift and change, as if the cave itself is alive. The deeper one descends, the more the senses begin to betray. Footsteps echo in ways that make it impossible to determine direction. Shadows stretch and coil as if moving of their own accord, and an eerie sensation of being watched settles in, relentless and oppressive. Some explorers claim to have seen lights flickering in the distance, deep within the cavern, only to find nothing but empty darkness upon reaching the source. Others have described whispers in the air, voices speaking in hushed tones, just beyond the threshold of understanding. But no tale is more unsettling than that of the missing expedition, the group of experienced cavers who set out to chart the underground labyrinth, never to be seen again. The expedition consisted of 5 individuals, well-equipped and prepared for the challenges of deep cave exploration. They carried advanced mapping tools, oxygen supplies, and enough provisions to last them several weeks. They entered the cavern with confidence, leaving behind a detailed record of their intended path, transmitting regular updates to the surface team via radio. For the first 2 days, their progress was steady, their voices calm and focused. They reported vast chambers, some large enough to house entire cities, others so narrow they had to crawl on their stomachs to squeeze through. Then, on the 3rd day, the transmissions changed. The messages became fragmented, filled with static and background noise that sounded almost like breathing. The team spoke in hushed voices, their words laced with unease. They described the sensation of movement in the darkness, of shapes just beyond their light, of a growing sense of dread that none of them could explain. Then, just as suddenly as the disturbance began, the transmissions stopped. Rescue teams were dispatched, but what they found only deepened the mystery. The expedition's base camp remained untouched, their supplies still neatly arranged, their equipment undisturbed. But of the 5 explorers there was no trace. Not a single footprint, no sign of struggle, nothing to suggest where they had gone. Only their last recorded transmission remained, a garbled, nearly unintelligible message. And within the distortion, a single chilling phrase stood out, repeated again and again in a voice that did not belong to any of the missing team members. They do not belong here. As the rescuers ventured deeper into the cavern, they discovered something even stranger. The tunnels no longer matched the maps the team had been creating. Passages that should have led back to the surface instead led them deeper, spiraling in ways that defied logic. The walls themselves seemed different, no longer the rough, natural stone of a cave but something else, smooth, cold, carved as if by intelligent hands. Strange symbols adorned the surfaces, intricate markings that glowed faintly when touched, as if reacting to human presence. At the deepest point reached, the search team found what appeared to be an enormous underground chamber, a domed space larger than any natural cavern should be. In its center stood a structure, an ancient towering monolith covered in runes that pulsed with a dim, otherworldly light. And in front of it, half buried in the dust of ages, lay a single discarded piece of modern equipment, a caver's flashlight, its battery drained, its lens cracked. The search team did not linger. Something about the chamber filled them with an overwhelming sense of unease, a pressure that weighed on their chests, making it difficult to breathe. They turned back, moving as quickly as they dared, retracing their steps toward the surface. But when they emerged into the daylight, the air felt wrong, heavier, charged with an unfamiliar energy, as if something had changed, something imperceptible yet undeniable. To this day, the underground labyrinth remains unexplored. No new expeditions have been sanctioned, and the cave's entrance has been sealed, hidden once more beneath rubble and earth. But the stories persist. Locals speak of strange lights flickering beneath the mountain on moonless nights, of vibrations deep within the ground, as if something stirs in the darkness below. And for those who have heard the recording, the final transmission of the lost expedition, one question remains unanswered. Who or what left the warning? And if they were right, if humans truly do not belong there, then what does? Chapter 3. The abyss that breathes deep within the earth. Beyond the reach of sunlight, there are caverns so vast they defy understanding. Some say they were formed by time and water, while others believe they were shaped by something far older, something with a purpose beyond human comprehension. These subterranean voids stretch endlessly, their black depths swallowing all sound, all light, all certainty. To enter one is to step beyond the realm of the known, into a place where the air itself feels alive, where the walls seem to shift when no one is looking, and where the darkness is not empty, but watching. Among these places is a cavern whispered about by those who study the forgotten and the forbidden. It is a place where compasses spin wildly, where the laws of time and space seem to warp and distort. Those who have dared to explore its depths return changed, if they return at all. Stories of its existence have circulated for centuries, spoken of in hushed tones by those who have seen too much. Legends tell of explorers who vanished without a trace, their last words echoing through crackling radio transmissions, filled with panic and something else, something deeper, something more primal. Fear. The entrance to this abyss lies hidden beneath an ancient mountain range, its opening barely large enough for a person to squeeze through. It is as if the earth itself tried to seal it away, to keep whatever lies within from ever emerging. And yet, time and time again, curiosity proves stronger than caution. Those who enter describe an initial descent that feels normal enough: cold air, damp stone, the steady drip of water from unseen sources. But the deeper they go, the stranger things become. A group of seasoned spelunkers once set out to map the cave, determined to prove that the stories were nothing more than exaggerations. They carried the best equipment available: GPS trackers, high-powered lights, cameras designed to capture even the faintest glimmers of movement. Yet within minutes of entering the abyss, their instruments failed. Not all at once, not in a way that could be easily dismissed, but one by one, as if something were testing them, drawing them deeper before letting them realize they were already lost. Hours passed, then days. The team did not return. A search party was dispatched, carefully retracing their steps. They found the initial markers left behind by the spelunkers, a clear trail leading into the depths. But then, without warning, the path ended. Not at a dead end, not in a cave-in, but in open space, as if the ground had simply swallowed them whole. Their footprints stopped abruptly, the final one pressing deep into the soft dirt, mid-step, as if the person had been lifted away by unseen hands. Even stranger were the sounds. In the stillness of the cavern, where silence should have reigned, there was something else. A rhythmic, almost mechanical pulse, like the distant beating of a massive heart. Some who heard it described it as breathing, slow and deliberate, as if the cave itself were alive. Others spoke of whispers, voices too faint to be understood yet undeniably human, calling from the darkness. The search team did not stay long. They gathered what little evidence they could and fled, sealing the entrance behind them with heavy stone. Yet even then, those who had been inside the abyss were never the same again. They spoke less, their eyes filled with shadows that had nothing to do with light. Some refused to sleep, and when they did, they woke screaming, their voices hoarse with the echoes of things only they could hear. And then, years later, something changed. Seismic activity in the region caused a landslide, shifting the terrain. When researchers returned, they discovered that the entrance had reopened, but something was different. Where before it was a tight crawl space, now it yawned wide and gaping, like a mouth forced open. The air that drifted from within was warm, damp, carrying with it a scent that no one could quite place, a mixture of minerals, decay, and something else. Something old, something awake. New teams were assembled, eager to explore what had been sealed away for so long. They went in, equipped with better technology, stronger safeguards, but the results were the same. Equipment failure, disorienting echoes, the sense of being watched, not from behind, but from all directions at once. Some members described seeing lights flicker deep within, as though something enormous was moving in the distance. Others swore they heard their own voices calling to them, pleading for help from somewhere impossibly far below. Then came the moment that truly unsettled the scientific community. In one of the last transmissions received from the latest expedition, a voice broke through the static. It was one of the explorers. The words were fragmented, distorted, but unmistakably human. And yet, at the very end, just before the signal was lost completely, another voice joined in. Deeper, older, a voice that should not have been there. And it spoke just one word: return. The cave has since been declared off limits. Not by law, not by government decree, but by silent agreement. Those who know what lurks beneath have chosen to turn away, to leave it undisturbed. But some still wonder what lies in those depths. Is it a remnant of an ancient civilization, a relic of a forgotten time, or is it something else entirely? Something that has always been there waiting. Whatever the answer may be, one fact remains clear: some doors were never meant to be opened, and some darkness was never meant to be explored. Chapter 4. The Depths That Swallow Time. There are places in this world where time itself seems to unravel, where the deeper one descends, the less reality resembles what was left behind. Hidden beneath an ancient valley, known only to a handful of those who study the Earth's forgotten secrets, lies one such place. A cave system so deep and vast, no explorer has ever found its true end. Those who dare to venture into its depths tell tales not of rock and silence, but of something else, something waiting, something watching, something that shifts and breathes beneath the weight of centuries. Long ago, a group of geologists stumbled upon an entrance concealed behind a landslide. The rockfall had hidden it for untold ages, and when the boulders shifted in the wake of an earthquake, it was as if the cave had been waiting to be found. The team, equipped with the latest technology, prepared to document their findings. They believed they would map a forgotten cavern, analyze mineral deposits, and perhaps find evidence of early human habitation. What they found instead defied everything they understood about the natural world. At first, it seemed like any other cave, dark, cold, the air thick with the scent of damp stone. They marked their route carefully, ensuring they could find their way back. But the deeper they went, the stranger things became. Their instruments, so precise at the surface, began to fail. Clocks slowed, watches stopped, digital readings flickered and blinked as if caught in some unseen current. The deeper they went, the less reliable their sense of time became. They had expected darkness, but what unnerved them most was the silence. Not the quiet of empty space, but something deeper, a stillness that seemed to press against them, as if the cave itself were listening. Then they found the doorway. It was not carved by human hands. The rock surrounding it was ancient, untouched by tools, yet the doorway stood there, perfectly smooth, an arch leading into a passage that should not have existed. It was taller than any of them, wide enough to accommodate a structure that did not belong in the depths of the earth. What lay beyond it was darker than the surrounding cavern, not just in light, but in presence. The air was different past the threshold, thicker, as though they had stepped into a different era, a different reality altogether. Some of the team hesitated, their instincts screaming at them to turn back. But curiosity overruled fear. They stepped forward, their flashlights cutting through the void. The passageway stretched far beyond what was natural, as if the cave had been carved from within rather than eroded by time. The walls bore markings, symbols that did not match any known civilization, yet felt impossibly familiar, as if they belonged to something older than memory itself. As they moved deeper, the temperature dropped. Their breath fogged in the air, but there was no wind, no drafts, no explanation for why the further they went, the more the chill seemed to seep into their very bones. The silence, once oppressive, now carried a sound faint at first, like distant whispers carried on an unfelt breeze. The more they listened, the more they realized the whispers were not in any language they knew, yet their minds tried to make sense of them. Some heard warnings, others heard beckoning voices, calling them further. Then they saw the shadows move. It was subtle at first, a flicker at the edges of their vision, but soon the shadows were not just moving, they were shifting. Something was there, just beyond the reach of their lights, something watching, something waiting. The deeper they went, the harder it became to tell what was real. One of them swore the shadows had eyes, luminous and ancient, peering from the walls themselves. Another claimed they saw figures, moving through the dark, their forms stretching and bending like smoke caught in a slow current. Then the doorway behind them vanished. Panic set in. They turned, retraced their steps, but the smooth archway that had led them here was gone. The stone wall was seamless, as if it had never been open at all. Their voices echoed back at them, distorted, unfamiliar, as if someone else was speaking with their tongues. Their flashlights flickered, the batteries draining at an impossible rate. Their compasses spun wildly, useless against whatever force had taken hold of this place. One of them, a veteran geologist, dropped to his knees, whispering that he had seen this place before. Not in life, but in dreams, in nightmares that had haunted him since childhood. He spoke of corridors that led nowhere, of stairways descending forever, of voices calling from the abyss, promising knowledge, promising understanding at the cost of something unnamed. The others pulled him to his feet, their fear overtaking their logic. They had to get out. They had to escape, before whatever lurked in the shadows decided it was time to reveal itself. Then, just as suddenly as it had vanished, the doorway reappeared. It was not where they had left it. It was further down the passage, as if it had moved of its own will, leading them somewhere else entirely. They had no choice but to follow. One by one they stepped through, their bodies tense, their breaths held. When they emerged, they found themselves not at the entrance of the cave, but somewhere deeper within. Their equipment, which had failed them moments before, was now recording again. But what it captured was not just their frantic voices, not just the sound of their hurried footsteps. it caught something else. A voice, not human, not natural, something vast, something ancient. A single word, spoken in a language none of them recognized, yet all of them understood. Leave. They did not argue. They ran. They climbed. They scrambled. They fought their way back to the surface. And when they emerged, gasping beneath the pale sky, the entrance to the cave was gone. No landslide, no rubble, just solid rock, as if it had never been open at all. They never spoke of what happened in the depths. Some left their field entirely, unable to explain what they had experienced. Others tried to rationalize it, to convince themselves it had been a trick of the mind, a shared hallucination. But deep down, they all knew the truth. Some places are not meant to be found, and some doors once opened do not stay closed forever. Chapter 5. The Cavern Beneath the Ice. Beneath the frozen surface of the world's most isolated landscapes, where the ice is thick enough to bury entire histories, there are hidden places untouched by time. These caverns, sealed away for thousands, perhaps millions of years, hold secrets that defy explanation. Some believe they are remnants of an age before humanity, hollow spaces carved by forces unknown, waiting in silence beneath the weight of glaciers. Others whisper of doorways, passages leading to something beyond human comprehension, where light has never touched and ancient things still stir in the shadows. One such place was discovered by accident, a result of an expedition meant to study the changing climate in the Arctic Circle. Scientists, drilling deep into the ice, expected to find nothing more than frozen water and compressed sediment. But what they found instead was something else entirely, a void, a space beneath the ice that should not have existed. The readings made no sense, showing a cavern so vast it rivaled entire mountain ranges, yet no signs of collapse or pressure damage. A team was assembled, prepared for a descent into the unknown, unaware of what truly awaited them below. The first thing they noticed was the warmth. As they breached the surface and lowered themselves into the cavern, the air grew strangely temperate, their breath no longer misted before them, and the ice that should have lined the walls was absent, as if something had melted it long ago. The deeper they went, the more alien the environment became. The walls, though resembling rock, had a smoothness unlike anything natural, almost as if they had been shaped by intelligent hands. Strange formations jutted from the ceilings like enormous petrified roots, pulsing ever so slightly, as though they were alive. Then came the sounds. A deep resonant hum vibrated through the chamber, neither mechanical nor organic, yet unmistakably deliberate. It was not an echo of their own movement, nor the natural shifting of ice. It was something else entirely. Their instruments faltered, compasses spinning aimlessly, communication devices crackling with bursts of static, and then just beyond the reach of their floodlights, shadows began to move. Panic set in, but the cavern allowed no quick escape. The walls, though once wide and accommodating, seemed to narrow and twist as they tried to retreat. The descent had been slow and careful, but now in their frantic attempt to flee, the path seemed longer than before, stretching impossibly beyond what they had mapped. A feeling of something unseen, watching them, grew unbearable, pressing against their minds with an intensity that made breathing difficult. Some described it as an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they were intruding upon a place that was never meant to be found. When they finally emerged, gasping for air as if they had been drowning, they refused to speak of what they had witnessed. Their cameras, meant to document every step, held only corrupted footage, static and distortion, where there should have been images. Some of them left the field entirely, unable to continue their work. Others spent years trying to understand, researching ancient myths and forbidden texts, searching for any mention of what lay beneath the ice. They found whispers scattered among the oldest stories of mankind, tales of gods and creatures that retreated beneath the earth when the world grew too bright, waiting for a time when the darkness would return. There were reports that followed, unofficial, buried beneath layers of classified documents. Scientists who had disappeared, their last known locations aligning too closely with the coordinates of the cavern. Unmarked helicopters seen hovering over the ice, their intentions unknown. Locals, far from the reach of official accounts, spoke of lights in the distance, appearing and vanishing as if something beneath the ice still stirred. What had been dismissed as superstition now carried a weight that was difficult to ignore. A decision was made to seal the site permanently. The entrance was collapsed, buried beneath tons of ice and stone, and the expedition's findings were classified. The world moved on as it always does, but those who had been there, who had seen what lay beneath, could never truly leave it behind. Some fell into obsession, scouring ancient texts and forbidden knowledge for any hint of what they had glimpsed. Others withdrew completely, refusing to speak of the experience, as if acknowledging it would give it power once more. But the ice does not forget. Beneath the shifting glaciers, where time stands still, the cavern remains, waiting, watching, breathing. And some believe that one day, when the conditions are right, the passage will open once more, not by accident, but by design. And when that day comes, whatever lies within will not be content to remain hidden any longer. Chapter 6. The Abyss Beneath the Earth. Deep within the forgotten corners of the world, there are places untouched by human hands, passages leading to depths so profound that no light has ever reached them. Some claim these subterranean realms are merely the remnants of ancient geological activity, natural formations shaped by time and pressure. But others, those who have glimpsed what lies beyond the known, believe differently. They speak of something else, something far older than humanity, hidden away beneath the surface, waiting. One such place was uncovered in the uncharted depths of the Amazon rainforest. A team of explorers, following an old map rumored to have been passed down through generations of indigenous tribes, stumbled upon what appeared to be a simple cave. At first glance, there was nothing extraordinary about it, just a dark, yawning entrance partially obscured by dense vegetation. But the deeper they ventured, the more unnatural it seemed. The walls, lined with unfamiliar patterns, seemed less like stone and more like something ancient and carved. The air, thick and humid outside, grew unnaturally cold within, carrying an odd metallic scent that set their nerves on edge. For hours, they descended, their footsteps echoing endlessly in the cavernous void. The further they went, the more the walls seemed to change. Smooth surfaces gave way to jagged, unnatural formations, as though something had burrowed through the rock, carving its own path through the earth. The tunnels stretched endlessly, branching in ways that defied logic, turning back upon themselves in a maze that no map could capture. Their lights barely pierced the darkness, swallowed whole by the sheer blackness that surrounded them. It was as if the very space absorbed light, refusing to give up its secrets. Then they found the pit. A chasm so vast it seemed bottomless, its edges jagged and uneven, as though something massive had once clawed its way through. Their equipment, designed to measure depth and map the underground, failed to register any end to the abyss. No matter how far they shone their lights, they could not see the bottom. One of them dropped a stone, expecting to hear it hit something far below, but the silence that followed was more unsettling than any sound could have been. It simply fell, vanishing into nothingness, never to be heard again. Against better judgment, they set up their ropes and prepared to descend. The first explorer, harnessed and secured, slowly made his way down. The radio crackled with updates, his voice steady at first, but as he descended, his words grew strained, then frantic. He described structures, impossible architecture, pillars of something that looked like bone yet felt like metal. Symbols, etched deep into the rock, pulsating as if alive. Then, without warning, the radio went silent. Panic set in. They tried to pull him back up, but the rope, still attached, was slack. No resistance, no weight. It was as if he had simply vanished. Fear took hold, but one of them, driven by something he could not explain, continued the descent. What he saw defied all reason. The cavern was no longer a natural formation. It was something else entirely. The walls were lined with structures, unnatural and symmetrical, stretching out like the remains of an ancient city buried beneath the world. The air pulsed with an unseen energy, making the very rock seem to breathe. And there, at the center of it all, was something vast, something sleeping. It was not a creature in the traditional sense, not flesh and bone, but something that existed beyond human comprehension. A shape that shifted without moving, that loomed without occupying space, and then it stirred. A deep, resonant vibration filled the cavern, a soundless hum that pressed against his skull, against his thoughts. A voice without words, an intent without language. He did not remember climbing back up, he did not remember escaping. Only that, when he surfaced, the others were gone, and the cave, where it should have been, was no longer there. As if the earth itself had swallowed it whole, sealing whatever lay beneath away once more. No one believed him. His reports were dismissed, his claims attributed to exhaustion and hallucination. But he knew the truth. Something was down there, something beyond human understanding. And it was not alone. Chapter 7. The labyrinth of whispers deep beneath the earth. Where the air grows thick and sound carries in unnatural ways, there exists a labyrinth older than recorded history. No maps detail its true size, no explorer has ever fully charted its corridors, and those who venture too far often fail to return. The walls hum with voices that do not belong to the living, and in the farthest reaches, where even darkness fears to tread, something stirs. The labyrinth was first discovered beneath a collapsed ruin, hidden beneath the desert sands. A team of archaeologists had been excavating what they believed to be an ancient temple when they stumbled upon a narrow passageway descending into the unknown. Unlike the ruins above, the stonework here was pristine, untouched by time, as though the hands that had carved it had only just finished their work. Symbols, unfamiliar yet eerily recognizable, lined the walls, their meanings lost to the ages. From the very beginning, the expedition was plagued by an uneasy presence. Their voices echoed strangely, distorting in ways that made it sound as if others were speaking just beyond the reach of their lights. Shadows moved where none should have existed, and as they ventured deeper, the sense of being watched became unbearable. Then the whispers began. At first they were faint, like the distant murmurs of a long-forgotten conversation. But as the team pressed forward, the voices grew clearer, ancient tongues speaking words that none of them should have understood, yet somehow did. It was as if the walls themselves were speaking, revealing glimpses of a past no history book had ever recorded. Some members of the team claimed the whispers called their names. Others swore they heard instructions, beckoning them to follow deeper into the labyrinth's heart. The deeper they went, the more unnatural the environment became. The stone corridors twisted in impossible ways, forming spirals and loops that should not have existed. Time seemed to bend, their torches burning longer than they should have, yet their bodies feeling the weight of exhaustion as if days had passed. Instruments failed, compasses spun wildly, and their radio signals turned to nothing but static. One by one, they began to lose their way. Then something moved in the distance. It was no trick of the light, no mere shifting shadow. It was something real, something aware. A figure stood at the edge of their vision, faceless yet unmistakably human in shape. It did not walk, nor did it breathe, yet it was undeniably present. And when they turned away, it was suddenly closer. Panic took hold. The group scrambled to retrace their steps, but the labyrinth had changed. Corridors they had passed through minutes before were now sealed. New passages had opened where there had been none. It was as if the structure itself was alive, shifting to keep them trapped within its depths. The whispers became deafening, growing into a chorus of voices overlapping and twisting together into something indescribable. One by one, the team members vanished into the darkness, their screams cut short as the labyrinth swallowed them whole. When the last remaining member of the expedition finally stumbled out into the open air, they were alone. The entrance they had used was gone, buried beneath rubble, as if it had never existed. Their journals were empty, their recordings erased. The world above had continued as if nothing had happened, unaware that something ancient had briefly stirred in the depths. No one has found the labyrinth since, Some say it still exists, hidden beneath the earth, waiting for those who dare to seek it out. And in the dead of night, if you listen closely enough, you might just hear the whispers calling once more. Chapter 8. The Abyss of Forgotten Echoes. In the deepest corners of the earth, where no light has ever reached and no breath of wind has ever stirred, there exists an abyss untouched by time. It is a place known only in fragments of lost history, whispered of in half-forgotten myths, and scrawled in texts that should not exist. Some claim it is the graveyard of ancient civilizations, swallowed whole by the unrelenting depths. Others speak of it as a realm outside of time itself, a chasm where reality bends and the past, present, and future blur into a single, inescapable moment. The first modern record of the abyss surfaced from a team of explorers who had been mapping a cave system deep in the remote wilderness of a land untouched by human hands for centuries. Their mission was routine: chart the underground rivers, analyze the limestone formations, and document any unusual geological phenomena. They did not expect to find the cavern, nor the silent abyss that yawned beneath it. It was not like any other chasm they had encountered. Its walls did not echo their voices, as if the very air swallowed sound before it could travel. The descent into the darkness was slow, their harnesses straining against unseen forces that seemed to tug them downward, pulling at the edges of their senses. The deeper they went, the more distorted their perceptions became. Time stretched thin, minutes turned into hours, and yet their descent continued as though they were suspended in an eternal fall. Then came the first echo, not of their own voices, but of something else. A whisper faint but undeniable, weaving through the cavern like a tendril of forgotten memory. It spoke in a tongue they did not recognize, yet each of them understood its meaning in the marrow of their bones. It was not a greeting. It was a warning. The lowest point of the abyss was not a solid floor, but a shifting mist that seemed to breathe as if it were alive. Shapes moved within it, some recognizable as human, others twisting into impossibilities that defied logic. The air was thick with something unseen, pressing against their skin like a presence watching from beyond the veil of existence. And then the echoes returned, no longer whispers, but voices layered upon one another, calling names that had not been spoken in centuries. One of the team members, overwhelmed by the presence, stepped forward, drawn by something unseen. As his foot touched the mist, he was gone. There was no scream, no struggle, only an abrupt absence, as if he had never existed at all. Panic seized the rest of the team as they scrambled to retreat, their ascent far slower than their descent, as if the abyss itself did not wish to let them go. Hours passed, or perhaps days. When they finally emerged back into the world above, they found their equipment malfunctioning, their recorded footage erased, and their missing teammate's name absent from every log and document. Even their own memories of him began to fade, slipping through their minds like sand through fingers. It was as if he had never been born, as if he had never set foot upon this earth. No expedition has since attempted to locate the abyss again, for those who hear of it are gripped by an inexplicable fear, a certainty that some places are meant to remain undisturbed. Yet, in the silence of the deepest caves, if one listens closely, there is a chance they may hear an echo of something lost, something waiting. Chapter 9. The Abyss Beneath the Ice. Far beyond the reach of sunlight, where the world is frozen in an unbroken expanse of white, there are places that no human has ever truly explored. Beneath the thick sheets of ice, deeper than the deepest ocean trenches, lie caverns so vast they could house entire cities. These are the hidden abysses of the polar regions, dark, silent, and untouched by time. It began with an expedition into the Antarctic interior, where a team of geologists and glaciologists set out to study the ancient ice. Drilling deep into the frozen crust, they expected to find only layers upon layers of compacted snow and ice formed over millennia. Instead, their instruments detected something unexpected, a hollow void stretching miles below, far larger than any known cavern beneath the ice. Eager to explore, they lowered specialized equipment into the abyss. What they found defied explanation. At first there was only darkness, but as the cameras adjusted, they revealed something extraordinary. A vast subterranean chamber, walls glistening with what appeared to be frozen structures, unnatural in their precision. The walls were smooth, as if carved with purpose, reflecting the dim glow of their lights with an eerie, crystalline sheen. It was clear this place was not a natural formation. Further investigation yielded even stranger discoveries. Within the ice, frozen in perfect preservation, were remnants of something ancient, artifacts that did not match any known civilization. Geometric patterns, inscriptions that did not belong to any human language, and what appeared to be skeletal remains, unlike anything found on Earth. Some resembled elongated skulls with deep-set cavities where eyes should have been, while others had oddly jointed limbs, suggesting an anatomy that defied biological norms. The deeper they explored, the more the expedition members began to feel a presence. The cold here was not just physical, it carried an unnatural weight, as though something unseen was pressing down upon them. The air, though stagnant, carried whispers, faint, indecipherable murmurs that seemed to come from the ice itself. Some of the team reported hearing their names spoken, distant but unmistakable, as if something deep below was aware of their intrusion. Then the ice shifted. A tremor, subtle at first, grew into a violent quake. Cracks splintered through the frozen walls, and a deep rumbling echoed through the abyss. Something had awakened. Panic took hold as the team scrambled to retreat. Their equipment malfunctioned, lights flickered, radios turned to static, and their instruments, which had been recording data non-stop, suddenly ceased transmission. It was as if something did not want them to leave with what they had found. The temperature, already frigid, plummeted further, a suffocating chill that seemed to seep into their very bones. As they ascended, the cameras caught one final image before going dark. Deep within the abyss, something moved. It was large, its shape obscured by the ice, but unmistakably alive. The last footage showed a shadow shifting against the frozen walls, an outline too vast and too deliberate to be a trick of the light. A slow, rhythmic pulse emanated from the depths, a vibration that seemed to pass through the ice itself, almost like the heartbeat of something enormous and waiting. By the time they reached the surface, the entrance to the cavern had collapsed. Any trace of what lay beneath had been sealed away once more, buried under the endless ice. The official report labeled it as an unexplained geological anomaly, but those who had been there knew the truth. The abyss beneath the ice was not empty, and whatever dwelled within it was never meant to be disturbed. Some of the team never spoke about it again. Others suffered from strange dreams, visions of impossible landscapes, frozen cities with towering spires, and corridors stretching endlessly into the darkness. A few disappeared entirely, walking off into the cold with no explanation, as if answering a call only they could hear. Years later, a second expedition tried to locate the site based on what little data had been salvaged, but the terrain had changed. The entrance was gone, the ice covering any trace of their discovery. To this day, satellite scans occasionally detect unusual voids beneath the Antarctic ice, immense hollow chambers with no known explanation. And yet the whispers persist. In the dead of night, radio operators at remote Antarctic stations sometimes pick up faint transmissions, words in no known language, echoing from beneath the frozen wasteland. Some believe it is merely the ice shifting. Others are not so sure. Chapter 10. The hollow veins of the earth deep. Beneath the surface, where daylight has never touched and the air carries the weight of forgotten time, there exists a system of tunnels that defy all logic. Unlike natural caves, worn smooth by the patient work of water and time, these passages bear the marks of deliberate design. Walls too perfectly cut, turns too precise, depths that should not be possible with the tools of any known civilization. The hollow veins, as they have come to be known, stretch beyond the reach of any modern map, their true origin unknown. It was in the late 1800s when rumors first surfaced. A mining expedition in the remote highlands of Peru uncovered an entrance hidden behind a rockfall that seemed untouched for millennia. Expecting to find a mere extension of their mine, the workers pressed forward, only to discover a vast underground corridor extending beyond the reach of their lanterns. Unlike the rough walls of the mine, these walls were smooth, as if carved by unseen hands. Even more unsettling were the markings, symbols that seemed to pulse when gazed upon for too long, as though the stone itself was alive. The miners, eager for discovery, ventured deeper. They marked their paths, confident they could retrace their steps. But within minutes, their guides failed them. The tunnels shifted in ways beyond comprehension. Some corridors that had been straight now curved sharply, and others that had been empty now held archways leading into deeper darkness. The hollow veins were not passive. Something within them moved, changed, reacted. As they pressed further, they began to notice a low vibration humming beneath their feet, like a living heartbeat pulsing through the stone. Some claimed to hear faint voices carried in the vibrations, whispers in languages unknown yet eerily familiar. Then came the visions. One miner swore he saw figures moving just at the edges of the lantern light, humanoid shapes with elongated limbs, watching in silence. Another claimed that when he placed his hand on the wall, it felt as if something within the rock pulsed back against his palm, as though acknowledging his presence. Days passed, or at least they thought they did. Their lanterns burned longer than their oil should have allowed. Their bodies grew weary, as if they had walked for weeks, yet time above remained unchanged. Some of the men began to lose themselves, forgetting why they had come, staring too long at the walls as if entranced. One by one, they vanished. Sometimes a scream echoed through the corridors, abruptly cut off. Other times, a man simply turned a corner and was never seen again. Desperate to escape, the remaining few retraced their steps, or at least they tried. The tunnels no longer followed the paths they remembered. The walls themselves had changed, sealing exits, revealing new, unknown routes. Then came the final horror. One of the miners, the last who still held his sanity, swore that the tunnels began to breathe. The air moved not with the predictability of wind, but with the rhythm of something sleeping, something waiting. In a final act of desperation, he ran, heedless of direction, until at last he stumbled into daylight. His mind was fractured, his words disjointed, yet one thing was clear. He was the only one who returned. The entrance to the hollow veins had vanished behind him, as though it had never existed. When he led others to the site, all they found was unbroken rock. Legends persist, whispered among those who study the unknown. Some believe the hollow veins are remnants of an ancient civilization far older than any recorded in human history, one that existed beneath the surface, carving their world in secrecy. Others claim the tunnels are alive, a sentient labyrinth waiting for the right travelers to enter and never leave. To this day, similar passages have been found in remote locations, deep in the ice of Antarctica, beneath the forests of Siberia, even below the sands of the Sahara. Each time, those who enter do not return. And yet, the entrances remain, waiting for the next explorers who dare to uncover the secrets hidden beneath the skin of the earth. Chapter 11. The abyss that breathed in the farthest reaches of an uncharted cave system, beyond where light has ever touched, there exists a void so deep it is said to breathe. Those who have stood at its edge claim to have felt something pulling at them, not the simple gravity of the abyss, but something far more sinister, something unseen. A force that does not just draw in the body but the mind, the soul, as if the cave itself were alive and hungry. The abyss was first discovered by accident when an expedition seeking to map out one of the largest subterranean networks on record lost contact with one of their own. The missing explorer had stepped ahead of the group, his light bobbing in the darkness as he ventured just beyond their reach. One moment, his voice crackled over the radio. The next, there was nothing but static. When they rushed to where he had last been, they found only his equipment, his helmet resting on the rocky ground as if he had set it down before vanishing into the void. Shaken but determined, the team pressed forward. As they ventured deeper, they began to feel the pull. It was not merely a sense of vertigo or the weight of the cavern pressing in around them. It was something deeper, something that resonated within them. Their breaths grew uneven, their thoughts clouded. Even in total stillness, it felt as though the cave itself was breathing, inhaling and exhaling in a rhythm too slow to be natural. They described it as a presence, an unseen force that watched them from below, waiting. The deeper they went, the stranger the effects became. Time itself seemed to stretch, each step feeling like a descent through centuries. The walls around them, rough and jagged, began to change in ways that defied reason. Some areas pulsed as though they were alive, others absorbed sound entirely, leaving them in an unnatural silence that swallowed even their own voices. In that silence, the missing team member's voice returned, not through the radio, but through the walls, as if he were still somewhere within the abyss, calling from below. Then, without warning, their lights flickered. One by one, the beams failed, plunging them into the purest darkness. Panic set in, the team scrambled to reactivate their equipment, but the deeper they had gone, the more unreliable their tools had become. Compasses spun erratically, batteries drained in an instant, and their GPS systems displayed impossible coordinates, as if they were no longer beneath the earth, but somewhere else entirely. A sound rose from the depths, not an echo, but something distinct, something deliberate. A deep, resonant exhalation that rippled through the cavern, shifting the very air around them. It was as if the abyss itself had sighed, acknowledging their presence, tasting them. And then the shadows moved. They ran. Abandoning their mission, abandoning the search for their missing colleague, they fled the way they had come. But the cave had changed. Corridors that should have led them back twisted into new paths. Tunnels collapsed behind them, sealing them in. They fought against the pull of the abyss, feeling as though unseen hands grasped at them, slowing their escape. Some swore they heard footsteps behind them, but when they turned, there was nothing but the empty dark. Finally, they burst into the surface world, gasping for breath under an open sky they had begun to think they would never see again. Their missing team member was never found, his disappearance becoming yet another unsolved mystery, swallowed by the depths. And though they swore never to return, the abyss did not forget them. To this day, those who dare approach the cave report feeling the same pull, the same presence lurking just beyond sight. Equipment fails, radios pick up voices long lost, and in the dead of night, deep within the earth, the abyss still breathes. Chapter 12. The abyss beneath the mountain, far beyond the reaches of civilization. In a place where maps fade into blank spaces, there lies a mountain that the world has forgotten. It is ancient beyond reckoning, its craggy slopes carved by time itself. But it is not the mountain that holds the true mystery. It is what lies beneath it, a labyrinth of caves so vast and so deep that no explorer has ever found its end. Those who have tried speak of an abyss that seems to breathe, of corridors that stretch into infinity, of walls that pulse with a life of their own, and of the things that dwell in the dark, watching. The first accounts of the abyss date back centuries, whispered among the mountain tribes who call it the Veil of No Return. They tell of hunters who entered in search of shelter, only to emerge days later with hollow eyes and minds fractured by something unseen. Others never returned at all. The elders of these tribes say that the caves were not meant for man, that they predate not only their people but perhaps humankind itself. According to legend, the mountain was not raised from the earth, but built to seal something away. When a group of explorers arrived decades ago, they dismissed these stories as folklore. Led by a team of geologists, biologists, and experienced cavers, they were armed with the best equipment available: ropes, lights, oxygen tanks, and enough supplies to last for weeks. They expected a straightforward expedition. What they found was something else entirely. From the very beginning, the cave seemed wrong. The air was heavier than it should have been, thick with an almost imperceptible vibration. As they ventured deeper, their instruments began to fail. Batteries drained inexplicably, compasses spun wildly, and their radios crackled with static, even though they should have been in range. But the most unnerving thing was the silence. There were no sounds of dripping water, no distant echoes, just an emptiness that swallowed every noise they made. The deeper they went, the stranger the cave became. They found tunnels that should not have been there, passages too symmetrical to be natural. The walls bore markings unlike any language known to man, intricate spirals and glyphs that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye. Some of the team members began to complain of dizziness, of hearing voices just beyond the range of understanding. They dismissed it as exhaustion. But then they found the descent. A vertical shaft, wider than any they had encountered before, plunged downward into total blackness. Their lights could not penetrate its depths, and when they dropped a flare, it fell for what seemed like minutes before vanishing without a sound. Something in the pit absorbed the light, swallowed it whole. One of the climbers insisted on descending, convinced that the true discovery lay below. The others were hesitant, but curiosity won out. They secured the ropes and watched as he disappeared into the abyss. For the first few minutes, his voice crackled over the radio, describing the walls smooth, as if polished by an unseen hand. Then static, then nothing. They called his name, heard only the empty hum of silence. And then the rope jerked. Not the slow, swaying pull of a climber losing their grip, but a sharp, violent tug as if something below had seized it. Panic set in. They tried to pull him back up, but the line went slack. He was gone. What followed was chaos. Some wanted to search, others insisted they leave. Then came the sound. A low, guttural vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It was not the shifting of rock, not the groan of earth settling. It was something alive, something waking up. The walls trembled, dust rained from the ceiling. The explorers ran, scrambling back the way they came, but the tunnels were different now. They twisted in ways they had not before, leading them in circles, trapping them. It took them days to escape. Or at least they thought it was days. Their watches had stopped, their food supplies untouched yet somehow running out. When they finally emerged into the light, they found that the world had moved on without them. They had been gone for over a month. Their records were garbled, footage corrupted, their own memories disjointed. And of the climber who had descended into the abyss, there was no trace, not even the rope remained. No further expeditions have been attempted since. The cave is lost once more, hidden beneath the mountain waiting. And sometimes in the dead of night, when the wind howls through the peaks, the villagers swear they hear a whisper rising from beneath the earth, a name long forgotten, being called from the darkness. Chapter 13. The Vanishing Passages. Deep in the heart of an untouched jungle, hidden beneath tangled vines and towering canopies, lies a cave system so remote that it remains largely unexplored. It was first discovered by accident. A team of archaeologists searching for ancient ruins stumbled upon an opening in the rock, its entrance barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. The air that seeped from within was unnaturally cool, laced with an earthy scent that seemed almost untouched by time. It should have been just another cave, another series of tunnels to map, another relic of the ancient past to document. But what they found inside defied all logic. The walls were smooth. Too smooth. Not like natural limestone formations carved by water over millennia, but as if they had been shaped with precision, molded by hands that predated any known civilization. Symbols, strange and unfamiliar, marked the stone, arranged in patterns that seemed almost mathematical. And as the team ventured deeper, they found something even more unnerving: passages that should not have existed. Every cave has a layout, a structure dictated by nature. But here, the tunnels changed. Paths they had walked just minutes before would vanish when they turned around, replaced by solid stone. Markers they left behind, scratched symbols, colored chalk, even electronic beacons would disappear without a trace. It was as if the cave was shifting, rearranging itself the moment they looked away. At first they blamed exhaustion, disorientation, but then the recordings confirmed their worst fears. A camera had been placed at the cave's entrance, recording their descent. When they played it back, Their footprints faded behind them as they walked, swallowed by darkness. The entrance itself would sometimes flicker, as though it were never truly there. The more they watched, the more they realized they were not walking into the cave. The cave was pulling them in. One of the researchers, a seasoned explorer who had mapped tunnels across the world, began to panic. He spoke of a presence, something watching them from just beyond the light. He swore he saw movement in the darkness, figures that melted into the stone when approached. The others dismissed his fears until they heard the whispers. At first they were distant, just on the edge of hearing, like the wind slipping through cracks in the rock. But soon they grew clearer, words in a language none of them recognized, yet somehow understood. They spoke of a path that was never meant to be found, of a door that should never be opened. And then, one by one, the team began to disappear. It was subtle at first. A team member would step into a passage, and when the others turned back, he would be gone, his equipment left behind as if he had simply vanished from existence. No screams, no struggle, just absence. The last to go was the expedition leader. The remaining survivors had gathered, desperate to escape, when the walls themselves seemed to shift, closing in, forcing them down a single path. At its end was an opening, an abyss of absolute darkness, and standing before it was their missing leader. He was unchanged, yet different. His expression was distant, his eyes unfocused, as if he no longer belonged to himself. He spoke in the same whispering voice they had heard in the tunnels, his words layered, echoing over themselves. It has always been here. It will always be here. And now, so will we. The last survivor fled. No thought, no hesitation, just the primal instinct to escape. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs gave out. And then, suddenly, he was outside. The jungle was bright, the air thick with humidity. He turned, expecting to see the cave's entrance behind him. But there was nothing. No rock, no opening, just an unbroken wall of stone, as if the cave had never existed at all. When he returned with help, they searched for days, but the cave was gone. The jungle floor was untouched, the trees unbroken. There was no sign that anyone had ever been there. And yet, when he slept, he dreamed of endless tunnels, shifting walls, and a whisper calling his name. Chapter 14. The Abyss Beneath the Mountain. In the cold, desolate expanse of an ancient mountain range, where the winds howled through jagged peaks and the ground was layered with centuries of frost, a discovery was made that defied everything known about the world beneath our feet. It began with an old map, one not drawn on parchment or stored in any official records, but passed down through generations of a secluded mountain tribe. The elders spoke of a cavern deep within the mountain's roots, so vast that it had no end, so dark that light itself seemed to be devoured by it. They called it the Abyss That Watches. A team of explorers, drawn by the legend, set out to find this forbidden place. The journey itself was treacherous, sharp inclines, hidden crevasses, and the ever-present threat of sudden rockfalls. But after weeks of searching, they found it, a narrow fissure at the base of a crumbling cliffside, so easily overlooked that it was no wonder it had remained hidden for centuries. The opening led downward, deeper than any of them had anticipated. The air within was unnaturally still, thick with a scent that was neither damp earth nor decay, but something entirely unfamiliar. Equipped with state-of-the-art gear, the team descended, their lights cutting through the suffocating blackness. The walls were smooth, as if carved by an impossibly precise hand, yet there were no markings, no tools, no signs of anything that could have created such perfection. The deeper they went, the more they realized that something was off. Distances felt wrong, echoes returned in ways they shouldn't, and the walls, though solid, seemed to pulse faintly as if they were alive. Then they reached the cavern, a space so immense that their lights failed to reach its limits. The ground beneath them was not stone, but something softer, yielding slightly underfoot, as if they were walking on the surface of something vast and dormant. In the center of this abyss, there was a single structure, an obsidian monolith, standing impossibly tall, with symbols etched into its surface that pulsed with an eerie luminescence. None of them recognized the language, yet all of them felt as though they understood its meaning. A door must never be opened. Curiosity, however, is a dangerous thing. Despite every warning, despite the unsettling silence that seemed to press against their skulls, they reached out. The moment a hand touched the surface of the monolith, the ground trembled and the abyss awoke. The air was no longer still. It shifted, thickened, hummed with a low resonance that vibrated through their bones. The darkness beyond their lights moved, not with the randomness of a cave, but with the deliberation of something sentient. And then, one by one, the explorers began to disappear. It wasn't an attack, not in the traditional sense. They would take a step forward, and in the space of a blink, they were simply gone. No sound, no struggle, just absence. The last two remaining, gripped by terror, attempted to flee, but the path they had descended was no longer there. The fissure had sealed, leaving only the abyss stretching endlessly in every direction. Then the whispers began. Voices layered upon voices, speaking in a language they could not comprehend yet understood on some primal level. They spoke of a world beneath this one, of a hunger that had waited eons to be fed. They spoke of the price of curiosity and the folly of trespassing where none were meant to tread. And as the last light flickered and died, the final explorer felt himself falling, not downward, but inward, as if being pulled into the very fabric of the abyss itself. Time lost all meaning. There was no longer any sense of up or down, left or right. There was only the feeling of being drawn deeper into something that had existed long before humankind had walked the earth. He saw flashes of things beyond his comprehension, cities suspended in darkness, enormous structures of impossible geometry, beings that moved without moving, their very presence bending reality itself. He saw faces of those who had come before him, explorers from ages past, their eyes vacant, their bodies frozen in time, forever trapped in the abyss. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The whispers grew louder, blending together until they became a deafening roar. Then, suddenly, silence. When he opened his eyes, he was standing at the base of the monolith again. But something was different. His body felt weightless, as if he were no longer fully in the world he had known. He looked around, expecting to see his team, but he was alone. The cavern stretched infinitely in all directions, the light from his equipment casting strange shifting shadows on the ground. Then he saw it. The fissure had reopened, but it was no longer an exit. It was a doorway, a passage leading somewhere far beyond the world he had known. A force compelled him forward. He fought it, but his body no longer obeyed his will. Step by step, he moved toward the opening, the darkness within it deeper than anything he had ever seen. The monolith's symbols flared brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat, and in that moment, he understood the abyss was not a place. It was a being, and he was no longer merely an explorer. He was part of it now. When the rescue team arrived, they found no trace of the expedition. The fissure was gone, the mountain unbroken, as if no one had ever set foot there. But for years afterward, in the dead of winter when the wind was at its fiercest, travelers passing through the region would hear faint whispers carried through the air, whispers that warned them to keep moving, to never look back, and above all to forget. Chapter 15. The Labyrinth Below the Ruins. Deep within the heart of an uncharted valley, where crumbling ruins lay hidden beneath centuries of overgrowth, an archaeologist named Elias and his team stumbled upon a mystery that defied explanation. The ruins themselves bore no resemblance to any known civilization, no inscriptions, no records, only weathered stone arranged in ways that suggested an intelligence long forgotten. But the true discovery lay beneath them, concealed by layers of dirt and debris. A single, narrow opening led into the depths of the earth, an entrance to something vast and unexplored. The team was hesitant. Legend spoke of these ruins as cursed ground, a place where travelers vanished without a trace. But for Elias, the lure of the unknown was irresistible. With heavy packs and trembling anticipation, they descended into the darkness, their flashlights barely piercing the oppressive gloom. What they found defied all logic, a labyrinth so immense it seemed to stretch beyond the limits of the earth itself. The walls, though ancient, were pristine, smooth to the touch as if untouched by time. The tunnels twisted and turned in impossible patterns, yet there was no sign of collapse, no natural formations to suggest that this was the work of the elements. As they ventured deeper, they noticed something unsettling. Their compasses spun wildly, refusing to align. Their radios crackled with whispers, distant voices speaking in a language none of them knew, yet all of them somehow understood. The deeper they went, the more the labyrinth seemed to shift, subtly rearranging itself when they weren't looking. The passages that had been behind them moments ago no longer existed, replaced by new corridors leading further into the abyss. Then came the carvings. At first they were simple patterns etched into the walls, geometric shapes that pulsed faintly in the dim light. But as they progressed, the designs grew more elaborate, depicting scenes that made their skin crawl. Figures, humanoid yet distorted, stood in vast chambers, their elongated limbs reaching toward the sky. Others knelt before massive doorways, their faces turned in silent reverence or fear. In the largest engraving, a single being towered over them all, its form undefined, its presence suffocating even in stone. Beneath it, a single phrase repeated over and over in countless languages, ancient and modern alike: "Do not open the last door." Curiosity, however, was stronger than caution. Driven by the need to understand, the team pressed forward. The air grew thick, heavy with an invisible pressure that made their ears ring. Their lights dimmed, their batteries failing without explanation. Yet they moved on, drawn by an unseen force until they reached it, the final chamber. A vast cavern stretched before them, its ceiling lost in the shadows above. At its center stood a door unlike anything they had ever seen. Not stone, not wood, not metal, something else entirely, something that seemed to shimmer and shift as though it were not entirely within this world. It bore no handles, no hinges, yet the moment they stepped closer, the carvings on its surface came alive, glowing with a light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Then the silence broke. A sound deep and resonant filled the chamber, vibrating through their bones. It was not a voice, not exactly. It was a presence, ancient and unfathomable, something that had waited for eons, something that had been sealed away for a reason. The door trembled, as if something on the other side was stirring. Elias took a step back, the weight of realization settling upon him. They had gone too far. This place was not meant to be found, not meant to be disturbed. The carvings were not warnings for those who entered, they were warnings for whatever was trapped inside. But it was too late. The door began to crack. A single hairline fracture spread across its surface, splitting the glowing symbols in half. The air turned frigid, their breath visible even in the dim light. And then the whispers returned, not from the radios, but from the walls themselves, from the very stone beneath their feet, rising to a deafening crescendo as the door shuddered, groaned, and began to open. Panic set in. The team scrambled back, tripping over one another in their haste to escape. The labyrinth that had once shifted subtly now moved with violent intent, corridors, ceiling behind them, passages twisting in unnatural ways. The way out was gone, replaced by a single path, one that led deeper, toward whatever lay beyond the door. Then the light went out. Elias heard the screams of his team as they were swallowed by the darkness. One by one, he ran blindly, feeling the walls close in around him. The air was thick with something unseen, something alive, pressing against his skin, his mind. He could feel it watching him, something vast and hungry, something that had waited for an eternity to be free. Then silence. When he awoke, he was alone. The labyrinth was gone. The ruins above had crumbled into dust, as if they had never existed. He stumbled through the empty valley, his memory fragmented, his body weak. The others were gone. The door was gone. And yet he knew something had escaped. something that had been sealed away for longer than human history could recall. He had no proof of what had happened, no way to explain the terror that lurked just beneath the surface of his mind. But as he returned to the world above, he carried with him a single, undeniable truth. The labyrinth was still there, somewhere beneath the earth, and one day someone else would find it. And this time, the door would not close again. Chapter 16. The Abyss Beneath the Glacier. There are places in this world where light has never touched, where time itself seems to hold its breath, waiting. High in the frozen wilderness of Antarctica, a team of researchers stumbled upon something buried deep beneath the ice, something ancient, something that should not have been there. What began as a routine geological survey turned into an expedition that none of them would ever forget. It started with an anomaly, an inexplicable heat signature detected nearly a mile beneath the surface, far below the depths at which any natural geothermal activity should exist. The satellite readings made no sense, yet the data was undeniable. Intrigued and driven by the endless mysteries of the frozen continent, the team set up their drilling operation, their equipment designed to bore through the thick ice with careful precision. For days they worked tirelessly, drilling deeper and deeper, watching as the ice core samples pulled from below revealed layers untouched for thousands, perhaps millions of years. Then at precisely 2,000 feet, their drill hit something unexpected. Not rock, not ice, but a hollow space. A cavern, vast and uncharted, hidden beneath the glacier for eons. Excitement rippled through the team. They had discovered something unprecedented, a natural ice cave, perhaps an ancient subglacial lake, untouched by the outside world. But as they lowered a thermal camera into the depths, their excitement turned to confusion. What they saw defied all logic. The cavern stretched out far beyond the range of their equipment, its walls smooth and unnaturally symmetrical. Ice caves are often shaped by water erosion, twisting and jagged, but this was something else entirely. The walls were too perfect, as if carved with precise intent, and then there were the markings. At first they thought it was a trick of the light, the way shadows danced across the ice. But as the camera adjusted, the truth became undeniable. Etched into the frozen walls were symbols, intricate, deliberate, arranged in patterns that seemed almost mathematical. Not random, not natural. Made by whom? By what? The team was divided. Some argued it was an ancient geological phenomenon, ice formations shaped by pressure and time. Others, however, felt something else, something pressing against the edges of their understanding. There was intelligence in those markings, a message carved into the depths of the world itself, but a message from whom? And why had it remained hidden for so long? Curiosity overpowered caution. A small group of the researchers, outfitted with climbing gear and floodlights, descended into the abyss. The ice beneath their feet was slick, unnaturally smooth, as if polished by hands that had not touched the earth for thousands of years. The deeper they went, the heavier the silence became, thick and suffocating, pressing against their ears like the weight of the ocean. Then the sound began. A low hum, distant at first, almost imperceptible. It reverberated through the cavern, a sound that seemed to come from the ice itself, vibrating in their bones, in their teeth. It was rhythmic, pulsing, as if something beneath them was alive. The further they descended, the stronger it grew, until it was no longer just a sound but a presence, an awareness that coiled around them like an unseen force. And then they saw it. At the very bottom of the cavern, resting beneath the weight of 1,000,000 years of ice, was an object. Not stone, not metal, something else, something that shimmered as if it were not entirely in this world, its surface shifting like liquid but remaining solid to the touch. It was massive, stretching out beyond the edges of their lights, disappearing into the frozen darkness beyond. The markings on the walls converged upon it, leading to a single massive entrance, an archway, perfectly cut, waiting. Waiting for what? One of the researchers, a woman named Dr. Ellison, stepped forward, her breath fogging in the cold air. The hum had grown deafening now, resonating through the ice, through her very skin. She reached out, her gloved hand hovering just above the surface of the structure, and the moment her fingers brushed against it, the world changed. A flash of light, impossibly bright, filled the cavern, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to shatter. She saw, no, she felt, something vast, something old. Visions flickered through her mind, cities not built by human hands, structures that defied gravity, stars that pulsed with unnatural colors. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. She collapsed to the ice, gasping, her body trembling. The team pulled her back, their voices panicked, but she could not speak. Not yet, because she understood now. This was not the first time something had been found beneath the ice. And it would not be the last. They had uncovered something ancient, something waiting. And the hum was growing louder. Chapter 17. The cathedral beneath the earth, deep, below the surface of the world, beyond where daylight has ever reached, there are places so vast and untouched that they seem to exist outside of time itself. In the heart of the Carpathian Mountains, a team of explorers found themselves standing on the precipice of one such place, an abyss so immense that their brightest floodlights barely reached the edges of its walls. What lay beyond was a cavern unlike any they had seen before, an expanse of stone and darkness that seemed less like a natural formation and more like something shaped with purpose. It had started with a map, an old brittle document discovered in the archives of a forgotten monastery, tucked away among records of ancient pilgrimages. The map depicted a route through the mountains, ending in a place that bore a single name, Domus Abyssi, the House of the Abyss. No known records detailed what lay there, no expeditions had been documented, and yet the map suggested the location had been known for centuries. Intrigued, the team set out to find it, unaware of what they would uncover beneath the mountain's surface. The entrance to the cavern was hidden beneath layers of rock, concealed by time and the elements. It was only through sheer luck that they found it, a narrow fissure in the stone, just wide enough for a person to slip through. What they discovered inside left them speechless. This was not just a cave, it was something more, something built. The walls stretched upward into an unfathomable height, disappearing into the darkness above. Massive stone pillars lined the cavern, impossibly symmetrical, their surfaces covered in patterns too intricate to be the work of mere chance. The air was thick with an ancient stillness, heavy with something that felt almost sacred. The deeper they moved into the abyss, the more apparent it became that they were not the first to stand here. At the heart of the cavern, illuminated by their flickering lights, was something truly staggering, a structure vast and silent built into the very rock itself. It resembled a cathedral, but not of any known civilization. The architecture defied classification, arches that curved in impossible ways, columns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, staircases that led into impenetrable shadows. It was as if the builders had understood something about stone and gravity that had long been forgotten by the world above. But the most unsettling discovery was the statues. Lining the halls, standing in perfect symmetry, were figures carved from the very rock of the cavern. They were humanoid, yet their features were obscured, as if eroded not by time but by intent. Some bore elongated limbs, others twisted proportions that made them appear almost fluid, as though frozen mid-transformation. And at the farthest end of the hall, towering over all else, was a figure unlike the rest. A single monolithic statue standing nearly 30 feet tall, its face completely smooth and featureless. Its hands were outstretched, as if beckoning or warning. The team moved cautiously, their voices hushed, as if afraid to disturb the silence. As they neared the base of the massive statue, they noticed something strange. The ground beneath their feet was not solid stone, but something else, something arranged. Tiles. An ancient mosaic, covered in dust, depicting an image long buried beneath the earth. They carefully brushed away the centuries of sediment, revealing symbols and figures, scenes of people standing before the statue, their arms raised in what seemed like reverence or fear. And then beneath their hands, the ground trembled. A low vibration resonated through the chamber, barely perceptible at first, but growing stronger, pulsing like a distant heartbeat. The statues, which had stood in silent vigil for untold millennia, now seemed different. Their forms, once still and lifeless, appeared to have shifted, just slightly, just enough to unsettle the senses. The team exchanged uneasy glances. It could have been a trick of the light, an illusion caused by the play of shadows, or it could have been something else. Then came the sound. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, so low it was more felt than heard. It emanated from the towering figure at the end of the hall, vibrating through the very stone. The lights flickered. The air seemed to thicken, and in that moment, an overwhelming sensation swept through the team, something between awe and dread, an instinctive knowing that they had awakened something that had been waiting in the dark for far too long. One of the explorers, a man named Elias, stepped closer. His breath came in shallow gasps as he reached out, fingers trembling, toward the massive statue. The instant his hand brushed against its surface, the vibration ceased. Silence fell like a heavy shroud. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, from deep within the cavern, something shifted. A sound low and grinding, like stone moving against stone, echoed through the abyss. The floor beneath them trembled, the dust rising in delicate swirls, and then in the darkness beyond their lights, something moved. They had thought the statues were carved from stone. They were wrong. Chapter 18: The Descent Beyond the Veil. There are places beneath the earth where time does not flow as it does above, where shadows linger too long, and silence carries a weight too heavy to be natural. The explorers had ventured deep, deeper than they had ever gone before, into the abyss that lay hidden beneath the mountains. They had passed through corridors that twisted in ways that defied reason, through chambers whose walls bore markings older than recorded history. And now, standing on the threshold of something that had not seen light in untold millennia, they realized the true depth of what they had uncovered. The statues in the great cathedral had moved, not by much, but enough for every instinct in their bodies to scream that they were no longer alone. The air, once still and heavy, now carried a tension that coiled around them like an unseen force. The massive, featureless monolith at the end of the chamber loomed over them, unchanged and yet different. Elias still stood before it, his hand hovering inches from its surface, his breath caught in his throat. Then, the silence shattered. A deep, resonant vibration surged through the ground, rolling through the cavern in rhythmic pulses. Dust cascaded from the vaulted ceiling. The stone beneath their feet trembled, and the very walls seemed to exhale. The explorers staggered back, their lights swinging wildly, casting flickering shadows that seemed to stretch and move on their own. And from the darkness beyond, where the cathedral gave way to further depths, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not the sharp, hurried steps of fellow explorers, not the scuttling of unseen creatures. These were slow, deliberate, heavy. Elias took a step back. The ground beneath him gave way. With a cry, he fell. The floor crumbled like brittle parchment, revealing a gaping void beneath. The others lunged forward, but he was gone, swallowed by the abyss. His light flickered as it plummeted into the depths, illuminating something vast and shifting below before vanishing entirely. For a moment, nothing. Then a sound drifted up from the darkness, a low, drawn-out breath, as if something ancient and slumbering had just awakened. The remaining explorers stood frozen. Then, without a word, they secured their ropes. They had come too far to turn back. They had uncovered something the world had long forgotten, and now one of their own was lost below. They had no choice but to follow. The descent was slow, their lights barely cutting through the endless dark. The walls of the abyss stretched on forever, smooth and cold to the touch, as if they had been carved with precision beyond human capability. Strange symbols, different from the ones above, marked the surface, shifting in the dim glow, as if they refused to be fully seen. And all the while, the rhythmic pulsing from below continued, a heartbeat that did not belong to any living thing. When they finally reached the bottom, they found themselves in a space so massive, it seemed impossible. The ceiling was lost in shadow. The walls curved in a way that made them feel as though they were standing inside something alive. But what stole their breath was what lay before them. Rows upon rows of statues, stretching into the darkness beyond their sight. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Each one unique, each one frozen in expressions of horror, anguish, or silent reverence. And in the center of them all, standing taller than the rest, was a figure they recognized, the monolithic statue from above. Identical in every way. Elias was there, or at least something that had been Elias. He stood before the great figure, his back to them, motionless. His clothes were the same. His gear was still strapped to his back, but something was wrong. His posture was too rigid, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. The team called out his name. He did not respond. One of them, a woman named Lillian, stepped forward. Her flashlight cast long shadows across the cavern as she approached. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. And then Elias moved. Not turned, not jerked or twitched, moved. As if an unseen force guided him, he slowly turned to face them. But the face that met theirs was not Elias. The skin was there, the features were the same. But the eyes, there were no eyes. Just smooth, unbroken skin where they should have been, as if they had never been there to begin with. His lips parted, but no sound came. And then in that deafening silence, the statues around them began to shift. The explorers turned to run, but the ground beneath them trembled once more. The walls shuddered, and from the darkness beyond, a voice, not a sound made by any human throat, spoke a single word. A name. Their names. The cavern was not just a tomb, it was a doorway, and it had just been opened. Chapter 19. Beneath the Endless Stone. There are places within the earth where the rules of the surface world no longer apply, where the weight of time and history presses down like an unseen force, shifting the very air into something thicker, something almost tangible. The explorers had long since passed the point of return. The descent had taken them deeper than they had ever anticipated, beyond the mapped tunnels, beyond the layers of civilization, into a world where no human was meant to tread. They could no longer measure distance in mere steps. They could no longer tell if hours or days had passed. All they had was the dim glow of their lights, the steady rhythm of their own breath, and the ever-present feeling that something was watching them from the darkness beyond their reach. The tunnels stretched in all directions, winding and twisting in ways that defied logic. Walls of stone loomed over them, etched with symbols and carvings that shifted under the glow of their lamps. Some resembled ancient scripts, long forgotten by time, while others bore markings too alien to belong to any known civilization. Each passage they took felt different, as if the tunnels themselves had a presence, as if they were not merely carved by hands or nature, but by something else entirely. The silence in these depths was not merely an absence of sound, it carried weight, a suffocating presence that settled into their bones, pressing down with an unseen force. They spoke in hushed whispers, as if afraid that anything louder would awaken whatever lay dormant beneath the stone. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, lingering in the air long after they had stopped moving, as though the caves themselves were mimicking their presence. At some point, they noticed the walls had begun to change. No longer rough-hewn rock, they now bore smooth surfaces, polished as if shaped with precision beyond human capability. The carvings had become more elaborate, stretching from floor to ceiling, depicting scenes too complex to decipher in a single glance. There were figures, tall, elongated, featureless, standing in formation, their arms raised toward an archway carved into the stone. In every depiction, something loomed beyond the arch, something vast and unseen, a presence implied rather than shown. And in every carving, the figures knelt before it. Lillian traced her fingers along one of the figures, feeling the cold, unnatural smoothness beneath her touch. There was something deeply unsettling about the way they had been carved. They were neither human nor entirely alien, yet they bore an undeniable intent, a purpose. It was as if the walls themselves held memories, whispering silent truths that could never be spoken aloud. Then they saw it. At the end of the passage, where the tunnel widened into a vast chamber, an archway stood identical to the one in the carvings. Towering, impossibly tall, it loomed over them like a forgotten monument. Unlike the rest of the cavern, the stone within the arch's boundary was darker, deeper, as though it absorbed the light rather than reflected it. The explorers hesitated, their breaths shallow, their instincts screaming warnings they could not articulate. There was something deeply unnatural about it. The way the darkness did not merely exist within, but seemed to pulse, shifting in ways that defied explanation. Elias stepped forward, his gaze locked onto the void beyond the arch. He lifted a trembling hand, reaching toward the darkness. The moment his fingertips brushed against the surface, a ripple spread outward, distorting the very air around them. The stone trembled beneath their feet. The carvings along the walls seemed to move, shifting as if reacting to his touch. And then, without warning, the darkness within the archway surged forward. A wave of unseen force struck them, sending them staggering back. Their lights flickered wildly, casting chaotic shadows along the chamber walls. The silence was shattered by a deep resonant hum, a vibration that thrummed through the stone, through their bones, through the very air itself. It was not a sound in the conventional sense, it was a presence, something vast and unfathomable, pressing against the edges of reality. And then, the darkness receded. The archway remained unchanged, yet something beyond it had shifted. The explorers did not speak, did not move. The passage before them had not merely been a tunnel, it had been a threshold, one they had just unlocked. Chapter 20. The path to the unknown. There are moments in exploration when the air itself seems to thicken, when the weight of discovery presses against the soul like an unseen force. As the explorers stood before the ancient archway, they felt it, not fear, not excitement, but something deeper. An awareness that they had reached the precipice of something vast, something that had waited in silence for longer than any human mind could comprehend. The darkness beyond the arch was not mere absence of light. It had depth, movement, an almost fluid quality that defied natural explanation. It did not reflect their lamps, nor did it seem to absorb the glow. Instead, it shimmered, pulsing with an unseen rhythm as if it were aware of their presence. There was no wind, no sound, yet the air carried a weight of expectancy, as though the space beyond the threshold was waiting for them to step forward. Lillian hesitated at the edge, her breath shallow. "We document, then decide," she whispered, as though speaking too loudly might disrupt the fragile balance of the chamber. She raised her camera, but as soon as the lens adjusted to the darkness, the screen flickered with static. The device trembled in her hands before the screen went completely black. "It's like it's rejecting technology," Elias muttered, lowering his equipment. Whatever lay beyond the arch did not want to be captured. But then a change. The pulse of the darkness grew steadier, like a heartbeat aligning with their own. The vibrations that had surged through the stone had not vanished. They had become subtler, a gentle hum beneath their feet, as though the entire cavern had drawn breath and was now exhaling. Elias took a cautious step forward, his boots scraping against the smooth stone. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the air shifted. It was not a breeze, not the displacement of movement, but something deeper. His senses blurred for the briefest second, like stepping from one dream into another, and then he was through. He turned back, his voice distant, almost muffled. "It's not just a passage," he said, his face barely visible against the dim glow of their lights. "It's different in here. The air, the gravity, even sound feels changed." The others exchanged uncertain glances before one by one they stepped forward. The shift was immediate. It was as if the laws they had known no longer applied. The cavern behind them remained, but beyond the archway, space itself seemed altered. The walls stretched upward, farther than their lights could reach, but the stone glowed faintly, not from any bioluminescence, but from an unnatural energy embedded deep within the rock itself. Carvings adorned the surfaces, yet these were unlike the ones before. They moved. Or rather, they seemed to change when not directly observed, shifting in patterns that suggested language, yet one that refused to be understood. At first glance, the symbols resembled depictions of celestial bodies, great swirling formations not unlike star maps. But the longer one looked, the more they resembled something else: gateways, passageways between worlds, between dimensions. The implications sent shivers through them. And then at the center of it all stood another structure. Unlike the rest of the cavern, it was not carved from stone. It was smooth, metallic, with a surface that mirrored the faint light around them, yet revealed nothing of itself. A doorway, sealed but humming with potential. A choice stood before them. Lillian ran her fingers over the strange material, and it was warm, almost alive. "This was built," she said, voice hushed. "Not naturally formed. Something made this." The question was no longer how deep the caves went, it was who or what had been here before them. As the vibrations intensified, as the space around them seemed to subtly adjust to their presence, they realized one undeniable truth. They had found a door, and it was waiting to be opened. Chapter 21. The Doorway Between Worlds. There are moments in history when a discovery changes everything. When the veil of the known world is pulled back, revealing something far greater than anyone could have imagined. As the explorers stood before the strange metallic doorway deep within the cavern, they could feel it in their bones. This was not just another tunnel, another forgotten ruin buried beneath the earth. This was something else entirely. Lillian traced the surface with her fingertips, feeling the warmth that radiated from the metal. It was not the cold, lifeless surface she had expected. It pulsed, softly, almost imperceptibly, as though something within it still lived. The others watched, holding their breath, as she stepped back. No hinges, no visible seams, no mechanism they could see. And yet they all sensed it. This was meant to open. Elias knelt beside the base of the structure, examining the carvings that spiraled outward like tendrils of forgotten knowledge. He ran a gloved hand over the symbols, and for a brief moment, they flickered. Not like the previous carvings, these pulsed in response to his touch, as if acknowledging him. "Did you see that?" he whispered, turning to the others. Lillian nodded, stepping closer. "It reacted. Try it again." Elias pressed his palm against the metal. The reaction was immediate. The pulse quickened, the symbols brightening in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Then a sound, a low vibration, deep and resonant, echoing through the cavern, like the distant call of something ancient waking from slumber. The door did not creak or groan. It simply moved, receding into itself with impossible smoothness. Beyond it there was no darkness, only a pale, shifting glow that defied explanation. It was neither liquid nor mist, neither gas nor solid. It was something in between, something beyond comprehension. The air changed, thickening yet growing lighter all at once. Time itself felt strange, as though it was stretching and contracting in the same breath. The explorers exchanged glances, unspoken understanding passing between them. They had come too far to turn back now. Lillian was the first to step through. The moment she crossed the threshold, her body tingled with an unfamiliar sensation, like stepping through a field of static electricity, yet far more profound. It was as though reality itself was adjusting around her. The others followed, each one stepping into the unknown, swallowed by the pale glow. On the other side, the world was different. The cavern was vast, impossibly vast. It was not a cave in the traditional sense. It was a space that should not have existed beneath the surface of the earth. The walls were smooth, unnatural, curving upwards into a dome that seemed to stretch infinitely. Structures rose in the distance, dark silhouettes against the ethereal glow. Some were towering monoliths, others were geometric formations that seemed to defy gravity, hovering slightly above the ground. "This isn't natural," Elias murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is constructed." They moved forward cautiously, their footsteps silent against the strange, polished floor. The air was thick with energy, a hum that resonated deep within their chests. Shadows shifted in the distance, not from movement, but from the flickering of the strange light itself, as though reality was struggling to maintain its shape. And then they saw it. At the heart of the chamber, at the center of this impossible space, stood something that should not have been there. A structure that defied all understanding, a gateway, massive and ancient, its surface inscribed with symbols that pulsed in an eerily familiar rhythm. It was not just a door, it was an invitation. Lillian felt her pulse quicken. This was never just a cave system, she whispered. It's something more. Elias turned to the others, his expression unreadable. We have a choice, he said. Do we step through, or do we turn back? The answer they all knew had already been decided the moment they entered the cave. They were not meant to find this place, but now that they had, there was no turning back. Chapter 22. Beneath the Veil of Time. The first step beyond the gateway was unlike anything the explorers had ever experienced. It was as if they had passed through a thin membrane, separating their reality from another, one that had always been there, just beyond the reach of human perception. The moment they crossed the threshold, an overwhelming sensation gripped them. The air was neither cold nor warm, neither heavy nor light. It was as though they had stepped into a place where the very laws of nature were rewritten. Lillian inhaled sharply, feeling the strange energy coursing through her. Around them, the cavern had changed. The walls no longer bore the rough, uneven texture of natural rock. Instead, they were lined with patterns, delicate, intricate etchings that glowed faintly, pulsing in a slow, rhythmic sequence. The symbols were unlike anything they had seen before. Some spiraled outward like celestial maps. Others formed interlocking geometries that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Elias reached out, pressing his palm against one of the markings. The glow beneath his fingers brightened for a brief moment, and then, as if responding to his presence, the cavern trembled. A deep, resonant hum filled the space. A soundless vibration felt more than heard. The floor beneath them trembled slightly, not in a way that suggested instability, but as though something was waking beneath them. This place, Lillian whispered. It's alive. From the darkness ahead, a soft, golden light emerged. It was not blinding, nor did it cast shadows. It simply existed, illuminating their path forward. They exchanged cautious glances before moving towards it, drawn by an unseen force. Their footsteps made no sound against the smooth ground. Time itself felt altered, each moment stretching and contracting in an endless loop. There was no telling how long they walked, only that the chamber before them was vast beyond comprehension. And then they saw it. At the heart of the space stood a structure, a towering obelisk of unknown material. It was smooth, reflective, yet entirely solid. It bore the same glowing etchings as the walls, but here, the patterns were far more intricate. They flowed like liquid light, shifting and rearranging as though responding to some unseen force. At its base lay a dais, circular and carved with symbols that seemed ancient beyond measure. This isn't just a cave system, Elias murmured. This is something else. Something far older. Lillian's gaze was fixed on the obelisk. She could feel it pulling at her, not physically, but mentally, as though it was attempting to communicate. She took a cautious step forward, and the glow around the structure intensified. A series of images flashed before her mind, glimpses of landscapes, unlike any she had seen, of towering spires that reached into skies filled with unknown constellations, of figures moving through corridors not built by human hands. "Did you see that?" she gasped, turning to the others. Elias and the others nodded, their expressions filled with awe and something else, fear. This was no ordinary discovery. This was knowledge that had been buried, hidden beneath the earth for reasons they could not yet understand. The implications were staggering. What if? Elias hesitated, struggling to put his thoughts into words. What if this wasn't meant to be found? What if this was sealed away for a reason? Lillian clenched her fists. Then we have to find out why. The moment she spoke, the patterns on the obelisk shifted again. A new vibration filled the chamber, deeper, more urgent. The symbols at their feet began to rearrange, forming new patterns. And then, without warning, the floor beneath them gave way, not in collapse, but in deliberate motion. A hidden mechanism had been activated. The platform they stood on began to descend, lowering them into the depths of whatever lay below. As darkness swallowed them, a single thought lingered in their minds. They had passed the point of no return. Chapter 23. Descent into the Abyss. The descent was unlike anything they had experienced before. The platform moved smoothly, as if gliding on an unseen current, carrying them deeper into the unknown. The walls around them pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent glow, shifting in patterns that seemed almost organic. It was as though they had entered the beating heart of something ancient and alive. The silence was oppressive, not from a lack of sound, but from the weight of an unspoken presence, something watching, waiting. Lillian clutched the straps of her pack, her knuckles turning white. She had spent years exploring hidden places, but nothing had prepared her for this. Beside her, Elias studied the symbols shifting along the walls, his fingers tracing the edges of the strange markings. The moment his skin made contact, a faint whisper echoed through the chamber, not a sound in the air, but a voice in their minds. Words in a language they didn't understand yet, somehow felt familiar. "Do you hear that?" Elias whispered, his breath shallow. Lillian nodded, a cold shiver running down her spine. It's speaking to us." Before they could process the revelation, the platform came to a gentle stop. The space before them opened into a vast underground city, shrouded in a pale, ethereal mist. Towering spires, made of the same luminescent material as the obelisk above, stretched into the darkness. Bridges, suspended in midair without any visible support, connected structures that defied all known architecture. The air was thick with a strange energy, a hum that resonated deep within their bones. "This isn't just a cave," Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is something else entirely." They stepped forward cautiously, their boots making no sound on the smooth, reflective ground. The buildings were unlike anything human hands had ever crafted, curved and seamless, with doorways that shimmered as if made from liquid glass. It was a city untouched by time, preserved in secrecy beneath the earth. But it was not abandoned. Shadows moved in the distance, tall, slender figures that walked with an eerie grace. They were not entirely solid, their forms flickering like candlelight. They did not seem to acknowledge the explorers, yet their presence filled the space with an undeniable awareness. Lillian's breath hitched. "Are they real?" Elias narrowed his eyes. "I think they're echoes." As they moved deeper into the city, the whispers returned, growing clearer. They weren't mere voices now, but fragmented memories seeping into their minds. They saw glimpses of the past, beings who once walked these streets, their movements deliberate, their expressions unreadable. A civilization lost to time, yet still lingering in some spectral form. And then at the heart of the city, they found it. A monolithic gateway, taller than any structure around it, stood at the farthest edge of the expanse. It was adorned with symbols more intricate than any they had encountered before, shifting and rearranging in a ceaseless dance. Unlike the other buildings, this one was active. Its core pulsed with a deep golden light, radiating waves of energy that made the very air tremble. Lillian reached for Elias's hand. "I don't think this place was built just to be hidden." Elias turned to her, his expression solemn. "It was built to keep something in." As if in response, the gateway's glow intensified. The city trembled, and the whispers turned into a chorus of urgent voices. Whatever lay beyond that door had been waiting for them. And now, it was awake. Chapter 24. The Awakening Below. The tremors had not ceased. The city beneath the cave, frozen in time, now pulsed with a restless energy. The great gateway at its center was alive, humming with a force beyond comprehension. The shifting symbols on its surface no longer moved at random. They were forming patterns, as if responding to the presence of the explorers. Lillian and Elias stood in silence, watching the impossible unfold before them. Their breaths were shallow, their minds racing with unanswered questions. The spectral figures that had been moving through the city were now drawn toward the gateway, their translucent forms flickering as they drifted forward. The air grew dense, charged with a force that pressed against their chests, making every breath feel heavier. Elias took a cautious step closer. "Lillian, this thing isn't just a door, it's something else." Lillian could only nod. The feeling in her gut told her the same. This was not a simple entrance to another chamber. It was something designed to hold something back, or perhaps to let something through. The voices in their heads grew clearer, almost like a forgotten language reshaping itself into words they could finally comprehend. A warning, a plea, a truth buried beneath the weight of time itself. You must not open it. The message echoed through their minds, not spoken aloud, but imprinted directly into their thoughts. Lillian's fingers trembled as she reached out toward the glowing surface. She wasn't sure why. Something within her, some primal instinct, drove her to touch it. But just as her fingertips brushed against the shifting glyphs, the entire city lurched. A low, guttural sound reverberated through the space, something deeper than sound itself. It was a vibration, a presence moving beneath them, as though the very ground was awakening from an ancient slumber. The mist thickened, swirling around their feet as the structures began to shift. The bridges above them twisted, reshaping as if the city itself was alive. And then, the figures, the echoes of a civilization long gone, turned. For the first time, they were no longer wandering aimlessly through their eternal purgatory. They were looking directly at Lillian and Elias. Elias grabbed her wrist. "We need to go." Now, Lillian hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. The gateway responded to her touch, its light surging outward in golden waves that illuminated the cavernous space. The symbols rearranged themselves into a final sequence, locking into place like the tumblers of a celestial lock. A sound unlike anything they had ever heard filled the space. It was neither metallic nor organic, but something in between, a deep, resonant chime that vibrated through their very bones. The walls of the city quaked, the structures groaning as if struggling to maintain their form. The echoes of the past, the phantoms of those who had once lived here, began to dissolve, their forms unraveling like mist in the wind. The gateway was opening, a fissure formed in its center, an inky void stretching outward as reality itself seemed to bend. Something stirred on the other side, something vast, a darkness that wasn't just the absence of light, but an entity ancient and aware. Lillian's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet remained rooted to the ground. She felt the pull, not of gravity, but of something deeper, an intelligence reaching into her mind, whispering secrets that had been lost for eons. Elias yanked her backward. "Lillian, we have to go now." The first tendrils of shadow slithered from the gap, curling into the space, like fingers reaching into an unfamiliar world. The gateway pulsed, its glow fading as the presence on the other side pushed forward. The very city groaned in protest, as though it knew what was coming. With a final desperate pull, Elias dragged Lillian away from the gateway. They stumbled through the dissolving city, the mist thickening until it obscured everything but the shifting lights behind them. The path they had taken was no longer clear. Bridges had twisted, walls had shifted, and the exit was no longer where they remembered it. The whispers were no longer a warning. They were something else now. You were not meant to find this place. The ground beneath them trembled as the fissure in the gateway widened. Whatever was beyond it was coming through. Chapter 25. The Descent into the Unknown. The cavernous city behind them was no longer just shifting. It was collapsing. Structures that had stood untouched for millennia crumbled as the very foundation of the underground world trembled under an unseen force. The echoes of ancient warnings still pulsed in their minds, urging them to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The once solid bridges twisted into impossible angles, and the exit they had entered through had vanished entirely. Lillian and Elias stumbled forward, their boots kicking up swirls of the eerie mist that had settled like a living entity around them. The gateway behind them continued its slow but inevitable expansion, revealing more of the void beyond. Whatever lay on the other side was no longer content with being a mere whisper in the darkness. It was coming. Elias's grip on Lillian's wrist tightened as he led her through the shifting ruins. "We need to find another way out." His voice was nearly swallowed by the cacophony of stone grinding against stone, the shriek of air being pulled into the growing chasm, and the deep, resonant hum that pulsed from the gateway. Lillian's mind raced. The city had been built around the structure, not merely as a place of reverence, but as a containment. If it was opening, that meant its builders had never intended for what was beyond to be released. A sudden violent tremor sent them sprawling to the ground. Lillian barely managed to roll out of the way as a massive slab of ancient stone crashed down where she had been standing seconds ago. She scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged. Elias was already pulling her forward again, his determination overriding the growing horror in his eyes. Then the shadows moved. At first it seemed like a trick of the light, the shifting glow from the gateway casting eerie silhouettes against the mist. But then one of them detached from the wall, a slithering tendril of inky darkness stretching unnaturally through the air. It moved with a deliberate intelligence, twisting toward them with an unnatural fluidity, as though the very fabric of reality struggled to contain its form. Lillian's pulse pounded. "Elias, I see it," he shouted, yanking her to the side as the tendril lashed toward them. It struck the ground where they had stood, dissolving the ancient stone like acid. The air filled with a sickly metallic scent, and the entire chamber seemed to shudder in response. More shadows slithered from the widening fissure in the gateway. Some were thin and whip-like, others massive and undulating as if testing the physicality of the world they were emerging into. The mist coiled around them as if drawn to their presence, and the whispering voices turned to something worse: laughter. Low, knowing, and utterly inhuman. Elias turned sharply, dragging Lillian into a side corridor barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. The walls pulsed with an eerie bioluminescent glow, veins of some unknown mineral flickering with an internal light. The path sloped downward, spiraling deeper beneath the ruins of the lost civilization. Every instinct screamed at them to go up, not down, but there was no other choice. The passage narrowed further, forcing them to move single file, Elias leading and Lillian following close behind. The sounds of the collapsing city faded behind them, replaced by something worse, the rhythmic, deliberate sound of something following. Not running, not scrambling, following. Lillian glanced over her shoulder, but the passage behind her was choked with darkness. Not the absence of light, but something more tangible. Something that breathed and pulsed like a living thing. Elias picked up the pace, his voice a hushed whisper, "We need to keep moving." They emerged into a chamber unlike any they had seen before. The walls were lined with carvings, more intricate and detailed than those above. They depicted figures, not humans, but elongated beings, with eyes too large and bodies too thin. In their hands, they held strange instruments, some resembling tuning forks, others geometric shapes impossible to describe, and at the center of the carvings was an unmistakable image, the gateway. But it was different. It was shown sealed, with bindings of light crisscrossing its surface, and the beings standing around it with their hands raised, as if chanting or casting some form of containment. Beneath the carving, an inscription in an unknown language pulsed faintly, as if reacting to their presence. Lillian traced her fingers over the glyphs, her breath hitching. This place wasn't just built to hide the gateway, it was built to keep whatever's inside from getting out. Elias exhaled sharply, "Then why is it breaking now?" A deep guttural vibration rolled through the chamber, and the walls seemed to tighten, as if the very space around them was constricting. The whispering laughter returned, closer than before. Lillian turned back to the inscription. The light within it flickered, then pulsed in response to her touch. The glyphs rearranged, shifting into symbols she could almost recognize, almost understand. She spoke the words aloud before she even realized she was doing it. The ground beneath them dropped. They fell into darkness, the last thing they heard being the echoes of their own screams and the sound of something beyond the gateway. Chapter 26. The Descent into the Abyss. The tremors had become relentless. The city behind them, once a frozen relic of time, was now unraveling into chaos. The gateway, now fully open, bled a darkness that defied reason, an entity pushing against the barriers of reality itself. The voices that had once whispered warnings had fallen silent, leaving only the pulsing hum of something vast and ancient stirring beyond the veil. Lillian and Elias stumbled forward, their path obscured by shifting mist. They had no choice but to descend. The cavern stretched downward, an endless abyss illuminated only by the flickering glow of strange symbols etched into the stone. With every step, the air thickened, pressing against them as if the very cave resisted their passage. Elias cast a glance over his shoulder. The gateway had vanished into the shadows, but the presence it had unleashed was still moving. He could feel it, a slow, deliberate force that did not chase them, but simply followed, waiting for them to falter. "We need to find a way out," Elias said, his voice hoarse. "Before that thing catches up to us." Lillian's fingers traced the glowing symbols on the walls as they moved. They were shifting beneath her touch, forming patterns she could almost understand. "These aren't just markings, they're instructions." "Instructions for what?" Elias asked, glancing at the spiraling descent ahead. "A way deeper," she whispered. "Or maybe, a way through." The symbols pulsed, and a section of the cavern wall shimmered, revealing an archway that had not been there a moment ago. Beyond it lay another chamber, vaster than the ones before, its walls lined with enormous statues, figures wrapped in flowing robes, their faces obscured beneath ornate masks. They stood in a perfect circle around a stone dais, atop which sat a massive circular disc covered in more of the glowing glyphs. Elias hesitated. "I don't like this." Lillian stepped forward. The moment her foot touched the chamber floor, the statues stirred. Not with movement, but with awareness. The space became charged, the air vibrating, as if something unseen had just awoken. "This isn't a cave," she realized, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a threshold." A deep, resonant sound filled the space, a low chime that echoed from the stone disc. The mist swirled around them, drawn toward the dais, as if summoned by an unseen force. The symbols on the disc shifted, rearranging themselves into a sequence Lillian felt rather than understood. Elias clenched his fists. "Lillian, whatever this is, we don't know what it'll do. We can't go back." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she reached for the symbols. "And if we stay here, that thing will find us. We have to move forward." The instant her fingers brushed against the disc, the chamber shuddered. The statues pulsed with light, their masks dissolving into cascading golden dust. The ground beneath them began to shift, and the air took on a new weight, one of expectation. And then the floor disappeared. They plummeted into darkness. The world around them twisted, colors bleeding into one another, as if reality itself was being rewritten. The sensation was not of falling, but of being pulled, dragged through something neither space nor time, a passage that did not exist in any logical sense. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. They landed on solid ground. The space around them was unlike anything they had seen before. The cavern was gone. The ancient city was gone. They stood beneath a sky of swirling stars, their light refracted through towering crystalline formations that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic glow. A vast ocean stretched before them, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting constellations they did not recognize. Lillian exhaled slowly. "We're not in the cave anymore." Elias turned in a slow circle, taking in their surroundings. "No, we're somewhere else. Somewhere outside of everything we know." From the edge of the crystalline shore, something stirred, something waiting for them. Chapter 27. Descent into the Uncharted Depths. The cave had not yet revealed all its secrets, and for Lillian and Elias, turning back was no longer an option. The further they ventured, the more the cavern seemed to shape itself around them, as if leading them towards something that had waited in silence for untold millennia. The air was thick, dense with a presence they could not name, an unseen force pressing against their very existence. The light from their lanterns flickered, casting shifting shadows against the ancient walls, and with every step, they could feel the weight of history pressing down upon them. The passage they now entered was unlike any before. The rock here was smooth, polished, and carved with symbols that shimmered faintly under the glow of their lights. It was no longer a natural formation, but something that had been shaped by intelligent hands. Lillian ran her fingers over the inscriptions, feeling the grooves and ridges as though they were speaking to her in a language she did not yet understand. Elias stood beside her, his breath steady but laced with caution. "This isn't just a cave system anymore," he murmured. "Someone, or something, built this." Lillian nodded. "And whatever they were, they wanted it to last." A sudden gust of air rushed past them, impossibly cold for a place buried so deep beneath the surface. It carried with it the faintest sound, a whisper, distant yet clear, as if spoken just beyond the edge of their perception. Lillian turned sharply, her light scanning the tunnel behind them. There was nothing there, yet the whisper remained, curling around them like mist. As they continued forward, the tunnel widened into an immense chamber, its ceiling disappearing into darkness above. At the center of the cavern stood a structure, its shape defying logic. It was neither pyramid nor temple, but something in between, a construct of interwoven stone, spiraling toward the unseen heights. Veins of a strange, luminescent mineral ran through its surface, casting an eerie glow that pulsed as if alive. Elias took a step forward. "This isn't just an underground ruin. This is something more, something alive." Lillian swallowed hard, her gaze locked on the structure. "It's waiting." A deep vibration coursed through the ground, subtle but undeniable, a rhythm that matched the pulsing glow. The cavern seemed to breathe around them. The symbols etched along the walls flickered, rearranging themselves as if in response to their presence. They were no longer just observers, they had become part of the story unfolding here. "We shouldn't be here," Elias whispered. Before Lillian could respond, the light from their lanterns dimmed, not flickering out but being swallowed by the cavern itself. The darkness around them grew heavier, pressing inward, and the whisper they had heard before was now a chorus. Voices layered over one another, speaking in tongues long forgotten. And then the structure responded. The pulsing glow surged outward in waves, illuminating the chamber with a deep golden light. The whispers turned into a single voice, clear and commanding. "You have come too far." Lillian felt the words resonate inside her chest. It was not spoken aloud, but imprinted directly into her mind, a thought that was not her own. Her legs felt weak, and yet she remained standing, transfixed by the presence before them. Elias exhaled sharply. "Did you hear that?" She nodded. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. A shift rippled through the structure, as if unseen mechanisms had begun to stir. The floor beneath them trembled, and for a fleeting moment, Lillian had the unsettling feeling that they were no longer in control of their own movements. The cavern had become something else, something watching, something deciding. Then, from deep within the structure, a doorway began to form, its edges defined by an unnatural darkness. It was not a simple entrance, but an opening into something else entirely. A void, a threshold to the unknown. Elias grabbed Lillian's wrist. "We need to decide, right now." She stared at the void, at the shifting light, at the ancient warnings embedded in stone. The weight of the moment pressed down upon them. To go forward was to surrender to the unknown. To turn back, but could they turn back? The cave, the structure, the voices, they had all led them here. And something told Lillian that there was no such thing as leaving this place unchanged. The only question was whether they would leave at all.